You could buy gas at a zillion places around the country with different names, and you could get food at restaurants. It was better than American Express.
That was just like Howard Johnson.
You know, I had one of those times, and so anybody that came with me,
That's it.
yeah, you know, I'd just charge it.
Yeah, because I remember I was flying standby a lot and stuff. Yeah. Oh, that reminds me, standby. Let's see, it was Brian, Tori, and myself got on an airplane, and two of us were sitting together. I forget how but anyhow, the three of us were on a plane, flying standby, going to New York, I believe it was. And we took off. They took the seatbelt sign off, and so we went. There was two of us. I was sitting with, I think it was Warmack, sitting with Warmack, and Anderson's up here by himself because we couldn't get three seats next to each other. So we get up to go up and see what Anderson's doing. Well, they had kicked him off the airplane. Yeah, because we were flying standby, and one of the people had showed up with a legit ticket, so they had kicked him off the plane. Oh, Anderson, you know. So we got his slot car box and stuff when we landed, you know, and got his stuff, and then he showed up about an hour or two later, you know, in the airport.
That's funny. That's funny.
That was a time when Chris Vitucci, who lived in New Jersey, who was a taxi driver in New York, and also had a used car lot with his folks in New Jersey. Well, he picked us up at the airport and gave us a ride from the airport. And I can still remember now, we're going through the city, and I start to roll my window down. I'm sitting in the back, and I was going to put my arm out, like Southern California, it's hot, you know, and he goes, "Don't stick your arm out the window." And I go, "Why not?" Next thing I know, we're up on the sidewalk, back into the street, you know. He drove he says, "I'm a cab driver, man. You don't stick your windows outside of my car, you'll lose it." I go, "Okay." So, oh my goodness, I think that was my first taste of first or second taste of New York and that area and the city and all that.
What was it? You had that white Dodge, was it? With push button? Plymouth?
Yeah, I had that.
Yeah,
that
red
was my
Ram.
Truck the hood popped up on.
Yeah, but you know, one time we took his old Plymouth out in the oil fields and took it over dirt jumps, you know? So, knocked the wheel off of the thing, you know, and that's where it stood for a little while.
And
That's the radiator.
And you talk about broke kids.
Oh, man.
Pete's Dodge, we'd go down to these tire stores and buy Maypops from them, right? And put them on the wheels they have for spares. I still remember we left my house and went about a mile and blew another tire. I mean, we got a mile out of a tire, you know, that was, and we're back out in the back jacking her up, man, and putting another one on. Off we go. Had an old trunk full of tires. We were crazy.
There was the big champion, the race in 1968, I think, in Atlanta, Georgia, and me and Cukras and Anderson and Terry Schmidt. It was Terry. Took my dad's old, well, it wasn't old at the time. It was a Valiant, a white Valiant. The thing blew up. It blew up in Kingman, Arizona, Christmas Eve, and this was the time there was a whole bunch of Indians back there. They were dying of the cold. It was so bloody cold.
Car blew up 10 miles outside of Kingman, Arizona, Christmas Eve. Rod right out the block. Then we had to walk back to Kingman, but it was a long walk. And it was about minus 35 degrees. So we got to a Stuckey's, where we took cover in an old abandoned car. Went and knocked on the trailer. We could see a light on in a trailer up the waist, the driveway, and we Barney Pointer. So we knocked on the door, and no, they wouldn't open the door for us. So we said, "Hey, could you call us a cab?" You know. So okay, we'll call you a cab. And about 10 minutes later, a couple cop cars come sliding up in those gravel parking lots Stuckey's used to have, you know, and they handcuffed us, threw us in the back of the car, and I've never been so happy in my whole life.
They throw us in jail for vagrancy. We established we had money. We weren't vagrants.
And they finally called our parents, found out who we were. They said, okay, those guys they're all right. So the cops put us up in some really nice hotel.
The worst hotel you've ever seen.
I mean, you had to watch careful where you sat because something's going to fall off the ceiling, on you, the plaster and stuff. But
yeah, it was called a Hotel Beale. And years later, I saw a guidebook, and in there it actually had it listed, and under hotels it said Hotel Beale unacceptable. That was its rating. That was its rating.
But John, like
it was unacceptable.
He got us tickets to champion to get down to Atlanta. And we raced.
Hey, they couldn't have the race without us.
And then the champion guys, Cukras called champion, and what's his name? Jack Lane, or the owner of Champion at the time, or Bob Rule. They got us plane tickets. We had to go to, I think we went into Phoenix, got a bus from Kingman, Arizona to Phoenix, and flew to Atlanta, made it in the races and everything. And I remember I was leading the sports car race and leading the coupe race, and blew up both times.
Wow.
I think Howie won the Formula One race. Pete Von Ahrens won the stock car race, and I remember, I think, a guy named Phil Inglis, I think, won the sports car. And the car, the really good coupe car and the sports car I had back there, I sold it just to get a plane ticket home. I didn't even make the stock car race. I don't think because I remember I was sick as a dog.
Hey, we were kids, and it was like we were rock stars. But we were kids, and we really didn't know any better. And not only that, we all thought we were only as good as our last race. So you had to work hard. And I was finishing up on a point that was a little earlier when we were talking about that hemisphere thing, was that these talks I gave in front of these people, all of them were about what it takes to be the best at anything. And the way I told them is I ate it, I breathed it, I drank it, I lived it. Every minute of the day was thought on how I'm going to build the next car, or the next part, or the next thing, or drive better, or practice. Everything was on winning the next one. And back then, the pressure was unbelievable. I mean, the manufacturers pressured these guys to win races. Some of them were unbelievably cruel. You'd go to a race and there'd be these two guys from Mississippi, and they had talked this guy into sponsoring them, and they came to Ohio or wherever the race was, and they get there and these guys had no idea how fast we were, and they got there and they were like outclassed, outgunned, out everything, and their sponsors would go, "You guys don't have a chance against these guys. Let's get out of here." They just leave. They wouldn't even run. They just watch us run, and one of the ways I used to describe it is I would walk into a track where a pro had never been. Their track record is 9 seconds. My first lap is 5. They think I'm from outer space. You know what I mean? They look at you like you're from outer space. And you don't have to learn how to drive the track when your car is that much better. You just go out there, that's it. And that was that. And also places, we were running the miniature can motors just like they still are. There were guys running Boatmasters, this big a diameter, that long, big old, like the 36D kind of stock cars. They didn't have a chance, but the way it was then was at a local track, everybody was trying to beat the local fast guy. Well, whatever he ran is what they ran. And if the fast guy ran Boatmasters, they all ran Boatmasters. And that's where the paper idea, come out to where if we could, produce this paper, send it, this guy could see what the good cars look like, they go home, build one. because all of these cars, you know, that couldn't possibly work, they were all scratch built. I mean, the guys, a lot of them were beautiful jobs. The design was just, you know, there was no way it was gonna do anything. Our cars were weighing about 5.5 ounces, and theirs were 10.
Even though my father was, I was racing on, in the meantime, he's been run over on his motorcycle, lost his leg in this accident, sold his sports car garage, and bought Paramount Speedway. So that's how we got into the slot cars, as far as the commercial level. So here he's had this interest for a couple of years, has this horrible accident, then a good fortune to get the slot car track. So now he has his own slot car track. So I'm in there after school every day, practicing and building and stuff. And then I graduated in '66, so I was there building and stuff. But up until then, he had the track, I think, in '65. Yeah, it must have been '65, late '65 we got that track. Because I remember I hadn't gotten my driver's license yet when he got hurt. So yeah, it was '65. So I mean, how much better can you have it with your own, with your father making motors, the best motors around, and your own racetrack?
Oh, well, California was the greatest thing about it, and this is another thing on how it used to be. Remember how everything came from California? You know, it was the same with this. We had, there was Brian and Tori, John, and Mike and Terry and myself, Mike Morrissey, Quintana Durkee. I can name these guys. There was about 25, 30 guys that were all fast and at their home track, or like it, because we used to take turns racing each other's home track, you know, where you have an advantage. Everybody was fast and everybody was working hard. So we had this competition that just made us faster and faster. So when I started traveling, because I was the first one to do it, when I started traveling, most of the time we were way faster than everybody else, just because of the competition here. And Pete was winding against Bill Stubbe and against John Thorpe and against the other winders, you know, in the area. And so we had fast motors, fast cars. Hustings and I have an argument over the angle winder, who did it, things like that. But the thing is basically, I built 5 of them, and we went down and wiped everybody out. And within a week or two, there wasn't any more inlines. You know, that's how California did it. It just, boom, it was over. You know, like that. And we would do that. We did that with most major chassis improvements. And one of the reasons is we shied away from this kind of track. All of the tracks back then had bumps. So part of, none of these cars would even make a lap on those tracks.
Yeah.
You got to have drop armor. You're out in the first bump, you know. And we used to run on red tracks around here and different tracks that had bumps on them, and we got very good at it. And you go to a smooth track afterwards, there was nothing to it, learning it, and that was a big part of it, is you had to walk into somebody's backyard, tune your car up, and then learn his track.
But when I would go to the races, I was more worried about, when I go to a race outside of Southern California, when I travel someplace, I was always more concerned about the guys that would come out of the West than the Midwest or the East.
Okay.
And just,
How was the boys up in the Bay Area at that time?
they were fast. We'd go up there and run with them, but it just, our area always, there were so many racers in our group, and we had 60 raceways to choose from, and just within, say, a 50-mile radius, there was just, in those days, when you raced every night, or maybe 5 or 6 times a week, you could walk into anybody's track and within an hour break the track record.
Wow.
Yeah, so I mean that's just the way it was. In fact, once we got the magazine races going, that created or gave a venue for our groups. So that's when all the shop teams started becoming very popular and so forth, was that because now we'd have these magazine races, the magazine would choose a shop to have the race, and so your shop had to be up to a certain standard. So then all the groups would get together, and then with team rivalries, just like it became shops racing shops, and then the different manufacturers. Riggin was one of the ones that Champion, not yet, but they came in. They were already on the East Coast, and that wasn't. I don't think they really had a lot going on here on the West Coast until John Cukras got hooked up with them, and my father got hooked up with them. Then Champion was big on the West Coast.
The guy I always set to beat was Howie Ersner. He was the guy I always set to beat. He was the number one guy I wanted to beat, but this is the funny thing about it. He's never beat me. So that doesn't make a lot of sense. But the thing is that I always, since he was the king of New York, you got it. I always wanted to beat him, but I don't know, probably Terry. Really, Terry and I probably won more races that Terry got second in than anybody else. He was a perennial second guy. So was Brian.
All right, we're going to see if Dell...
It didn't matter where the track was, I'd win and they'd get second. It happened all the time. It happened so many times that it almost was a given,
That's how he won this car model race. He finished best in most races, He never won any of them, but his car model.
Terry won the championship.
He won the Rod and Custom and the car model championship. And the way he did it is he finished best in most races. Some of us won some and never finished.
Or weren't there.
Or
that was
there.
me.
Yeah, and Terry was always
I was
there.
traveling. I never won any of those series.
Yeah, because he was never here.
I never made it to all the races to have a chance to win one. I went back to Georgia to Champion, and they were going to a 24-hour enduro in South Carolina. So they went, "Hey John, do you want to come race?" And I said, "Yeah." I said, "But I want to race my cars." And they said, "Well, why don't you pick some of the guys to be on your team?" I said, "Okay." So I picked a few guys. Off we went. Well, we were running one of my regular, I beefed it up a little bit, but it was a regular race car like I normally race with a 16D motor in it. They were all running 36D Sidewinders because that would last, and they knew that they wouldn't have to change motors and whatever. And I just said, well, this whole thing is silly. And they says, we're going to nerf you. You're going to crash into us and break your car. Those motors the motors are never going to last like that. So we go out and race, and 24 hours later, we won by 6,000 laps.
With a motor that's going to burn
6,000.
Which was mine.
You just can't imagine how bad this was, and it was so bad that they quit having enduros. They didn't want to have them anymore. And I said, what's wrong with you crazy assholes? All they had to do was just have it for 36Ds only. Go have fun. But I don't know, they just couldn't hack it. That embarrassed them, so badly that. And then after that, of course, all the Champion guys wanted to be on my team. And this was a big track, 260-foot laps. We just wiped it. I mean, it's just like if you take them, what are them 36D stockers turn, 9 seconds? And these things are turning 4. I mean, you're lapping them more than once a lap,
The East versus West Coast race, that was the first big race.
Really, that you were still...
And John Cukras and I won that race.
Oh. You were in the same team, or?
Yeah. Bruce Pascoe came to me, and he was talking about this race where they were going to get the East Coast versus West Coast and everybody in between. And he wanted to know if I would want to run in it. And I said, sure, that sounds like fun. And he says, well, then pick somebody that you'd like to go with you. Well, if I'm not mistaken, at that time, I think Terry Schmidt had left the team and he was with John Cukras in Mura. So I asked John if he wanted to go, and he was all for it. So Dad, he built a bunch of motors for us and stuff, and we got together and we went to there, and it was in Memphis, Tennessee, and it was at Robert E. Lee Raceway. And it was really neat. Down the street from Elvis Presley's house, you know, we used to drive past the mansion. Hi Elvis, you know, and all that stuff. And but that was probably one of the most memorable races I ever went to. And we didn't have the fastest car. Howie Ersner and Sandy Gross, they were Team Rusket guys, they had the fastest car, but Ersner, he was too punched, man. He hit somebody and wiped their car out because he was too punched. But I remember one heat, he and I ran about 150 laps side by side, just neither one giving an inch, you know. Now I remember that heat. It was pretty neat.
My favorite one is one that would be anybody's favorite. Was in 1968, in July, there was a race at the Hemisphere in San Antonio, Texas. It had been advertised for like 6 to 8 months before. Every pro in the country and almost world